Gracious Heavenly Father, let us thank for this day that we can come together and do your work for Cherokee people. Guide and direct each of us that we might do your work. Look over the folks in harm's way overseas and those at home, and comfort those that are ailing, and give each and every one traveling grace as they leave here today to go to their homes. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Meredith Bailey. Here. Bill England.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Julia Coates. Here. Bradley Cobb. Joe Crittenden. Jody Fishinghawk. Janelle Fulbright. John Garvin. Chet Hoskin Jr. Tyna Glory Jordan. Curtis Snell. Chris Soap.
Here.
David Thornton. Kara Calvin Watts.
Oh, honey,
We do have a quorum.
we have a quorum. Hallelujah. I saw part of this presentation recently and asked Chief Smith and Todd if they would be willing to share that with council so that we'll all know exactly what direction that we are headed for the Cherokee people. And with that, call Todd, where do you go? I'll turn it over to you or to Chief Smith. Good afternoon. I didn't see you sitting there.
Thank you. I'm working my way down to Meredith to have it. Council resolution. Here's the signature needed. We've talked many times about strategy and plans and such. There are lots of different components. So Meredith saw a brief part of this a couple of months ago. So we put it together for your purposes, and we've actually put a little bit more time and energy into it so we can expand to our employees and to the general population in total. So there's still a couple of things in here we'll add to it, but Todd, if you will. We're high tech today. Turn it on. Okay. So while Todd's doing that, the first word that's going to come up is strategy, and that's a word that's often not understood clearly. And in essence, strategy is, if you know where you want to go, it's going to turn left, it's going to turn right, it's going to say yes, and it's going to say no. So it's a plan. It's a deliberate, thought-out plan. So basically, we're on a journey. And where we are today is point A, and we can do a number of evaluations, and this is some representation of it. You've got graffiti, you've got poor housing, you've got streets and littered and polluted, you've got roadside dumps. It tells us a little bit of where we're at today. The teen death rate for American Indians is 45% higher than the national average. Dropout rate is higher by 11%. Oklahoma is 43rd overall child well-being. Less than 10% of our population speaks Cherokee. Of approximately 5,000 speakers, 500 read and write the language. But where do we want to be, which is point B? Point B is a place of the future, a place that we want to achieve, things we want to see accomplished. What we want to be in the future, I believe, is to become a happy and healthy people. And the way to get there is economic self-reliance, sustain communities, revitalize our language, and the process of learning those things is education. So it boils down to jobs, language, community, that we've heard several times. And the historical underpinnings for that is very clear. Edward Smith 100 years ago said, "We're industrious, but no race or person is so endowed with these qualifications without a design and purpose." So going from point A to point B, where we're at now to where we want to go in the future, is a simple process. Say we want to go from Tahlequah to Norman, We have to know where we want to start, point A, where we want to go to, point B, and what are the steps or methods to get there. And one of the fascinating things in choosing how to get from point A to point B is the principles that drive our decision making. For example, if we wanted to go to Norman, the quickest way to see Sam Bradford play football, from Tahlequah, we take I-40 to Henrietta. But if we wanted to go to someplace and go shop at the mall and have a good meal, then we may not have to take a northern route to Tulsa. It's a little bit longer, but it would be a leisurely route. And then if we had a nice 66 Chevy Corvette convertible, we just might start to drive down US 66 and sort of cruise. So what is the principle that drives us? Is it the quickest? Is it leisurely? Or is it to go in style? And that will tell us what routes and what decisions we'll make. It will determine our strategy. So going from point A to point B is also going from now to the future. And when we look at the needs of our people, it also follows Maslow's hierarchy. But we have to deal with basic needs: food, water, shelter, health. We proceed to safety, securing families and communities. A sense of belonging, identity. Our family, our communities, our national pride, our language and culture. The self-esteem, who we are and what we want to be. Then ultimately, a happy and healthy people, balanced, meaningful existence. So going from now to the time in the future, we can evaluate where we're at in terms of basic needs and safety and security. Where you see some of the projects that we're working on. Another step in that journey is belonging to family, community, national pride, and culture. And here we have our community growth, our self-help projects, where we can create that sense of family and community. Going from now to the future, from point A to point B, is ultimately our self-esteem, our Cherokee identity, and that is captured in our language, our leadership efforts. Going from now to the future, is where do we want to go? A happy and healthy people. Balanced, meaningful existence. And I think many of you saw the little video we did on we call it Sequoia Soul, with the kids dancing to Motown, to the Temptations. Well, that was a glimpse of a happy and healthy people where children enjoy themselves so much they actually get up on the chair and dance. So that's the ultimate vision. Happy and healthy people. And most civilizations strive for that. And that's a great opportunity for the Cherokee Nation. How do we help our own people to get to that point? As individuals, as families, as community, and us as an entire nation. So the product of our work is a designed purpose. Where do we want to go? Where's point B? If we know where we're at now, the next inquiry is where do we want to go? And that is that happy and healthy nation. And it means not only fulfilling our lives for ourselves, it means children and generations yet unborn. So every decision has to be made, not what's good for us, but what's good for our children and those subsequent generations. The Cherokee Nation is not just us living. It's a body, it's a government that encompasses those Cherokees in the past, us in the present, and those in the future. So our path is basically our strategy. What are the steps that take us to where we want to go? Part of that, we have to understand where we've been, our history. And the future slideshows will have a glimpse of our history. But in this instance, that happy, healthy nation focuses on our philosophy, our strategy of jobs, language, and community. And here it's represented the three-legged stool: jobs, language, and community. It takes each to support the other. So our plan or our strategy is to build a map. We'll start going from Tahlequah to Norman. And the map is required to tell us the steps to take, to encourage us to take those steps. So jobs, language, community. And I guess the ultimate wisdom in this slide comes from Proverbs, where there's no vision, the people perish. So with jobs, language, community, what is the particular maps to achieve each of those? And we call these strategy maps. And these will be provided to you in more detail, but we actually identify by 4 different perspectives the steps or the goals we need to achieve in each one of those areas of jobs, language, community. We've had lots of folks and lots of teams work on these things. So the strategy map becomes more clear on how we can take the resources and best use them. Importantly, just like you have to make a decision to take a left out of this building to go to Muskogee, these kind of maps will tell us and encourage us to make the decisions. So when you take the right turn, when you say yes, when you say no. To determine if we're making progress along that journey, there's scorecards. There's matrices that measure the actions to tell us if we're actually getting down this highway to highway to Muskogee on our trip to the north. These balanced scorecards tell us if we're actually achieving a goal of improving the quality of life. If we're, for jobs, language, and community initiatives are actually beginning to work. So the jobs scorecard, for example, you can see a little part of that scorecard there is that we want to develop jobs. People enjoying opportunities for meaningful work to support themselves, families, communities by using their competitive intelligence. And another one is economic sustainability. So you can see in this chart there in the top left, the strategy it's dealing with, its jobs, language, community. The goal, and these are short-term goals. Develop job opportunities with respect and maintain Cherokee values. The objective, more specific, is the comprehensive coordinated data collection for family and community. And then the metrics, whether we're actually accomplishing that is a percentage of completion. And so you see the target goals in the last 4 columns. In 2010, we will develop that criteria. Fiscal year, the year after that is collect the data and create the database. So in each one of our objectives in the scorecard, we actually are developing criteria to determine if we're on that path, and we can measure. And it seems simple, but it actually it's quite a bit of work to map out those steps and see if we're on target. So to be a happy and healthy nation, the formula is very simple. We build people, families, communities, and nations. Jobs keeps our people at homes and communities. Extended families continue to thrive, community applying our language and keeping our culture alive. The essence of the Cherokee, this is the essence of the Cherokee people, which increases our quality of life. So jobs, in more detailed definitions, become economically self-reliant so we may support ourselves, our families, communities, nation, and the country. And so when we talk about jobs, it's just not only C&E or C&I creating jobs, it's recruiting new industries in that we don't control. It's creating entrepreneurialism. It's creating the job training so people can get those jobs. So it's all about what are the means and methods to become economically self-reliant. Language is just not revitalizing a language. It's developing and exercising Cherokee intelligence, expertise, knowledge, and proficiency specific to Cherokee. So we end up teaching and learning and using our language. We're also developing and enriching cultural identity by expressing and applying cultural attributes to art, song, activities, sports, ceremony, and literature. So the core of language is that Cherokee intelligence, and you express it in different ways of cultural activities. Community is the third of the formula, and it's holding ourselves together as a people in spirit, God, and whether the boundaries be place of interest. In place communities are like Bell or Line Switch, Breezy. You have communities of interest, like the Cherokee speakers, or churches, or even softball leagues. So we want to build the relationships with each other, infrastructure, and abilities. So how do we measure progress along this journey? And you've seen the strategy maps. And the strategy maps have 4 different perspectives. And this comes from the balanced scorecard, a tool that's been around for about 20 years. And the Mussolini's nonprofits, governments, and a number of industries use this. It has 4 different perspectives, 4 divisions, if you will. The citizen's perspective is what our citizens perceive of themselves as a nation. And what do we want to do for ourselves, our neighbors, our community, and the nation? So with the balanced scorecard, that is 1 tier in each one of the jobs, language, and community scorecards. The next is the internal processes. What work do we need to be good at to achieve our goals? So what's our processes? What's our policies? What's the guidelines we need to achieve? The next is learn and growth. What do we need to know to achieve our goals? How do we develop our competitive intelligence? How do we develop our human information organizational resources? So basically, what is the education learning processes we need to be able to implement our overall plan? Then the last perspective is our foundation. How do we recognize and best use our resources? And our most valuable resources, as we would all agree, is our citizens, our Cherokee lifeways, our intelligence, our culture, our sovereignty, which gives us and allows us the power to exercise and protect it, and then resources, physical resources like land and environment. So with each one of those disciplines or initiatives, jobs, language, community, we have those 4 perspectives to evaluate. Now once we've got a plan, how do you execute the plan? And it's basically leadership. Leadership is the thing that drives you from point A to B. It's a process education is a process that teaches us leadership and how to make decisions. So it takes us from where we're at today to a design, purpose, or vision to happy, healthy people. So if we have methamphetamine, diabetes, and low home ownership now, how do we get to that time in the future that we don't have meth problems or diabetes problems and people are economically secure? Parts of being a happy, healthy people. And so what you see at the bottom are documents that we produce internally to help us make those decisions and map out that process. So our identity is branding, and sometimes it's called messaging. And basically, we have a design guide that helps us express who we are to the general public and internal markets. What do we want? What is our vision, our goal, objective, and message? And it's just sort of like Walmart and Nike. When you see their brand, you know what they stand for. So with all of our images, whether it be an internal wall, an external wall, a piece of paper, an audio file, a visual, a video, it gives us the opportunity to express a consistent, cohesive message about what our core is. Then our Declaration of Design Purpose, the DODP, it outlines in more detail what are the principles that drive our organization and decisions, what is the issue or problem, how we define place, what is a plan, what are the steps to get to where we want to go, and the preparation. What skills, knowledge, and information wisdom do we need to carry out the plan? So it's an informational decision-making guide for our employees and our general population. Now, to effect any plan, you've got to have the resources to do it. And that's a budget. And that's, under our Constitution, the power of the purse belongs to the council. So you're the ones who who approve a budget so all the things that we've planned up to this time can be executed and implemented. What physical and fiscal resources do we need? And under our Constitution, what authority do we have to use those physical and fiscal resources? For employees to develop our people, we call it coaching and leadership. What is needed and what skills are required. So we actually have a computerized assisted evaluation for employees. We call it coaching, helping to give feedback to employees so they can really become better at what they're doing. Then the balanced scorecard, which we saw a bit earlier, is how do we measure our progress? Are those resources actually being used the best they can to achieve a long-term goal? So in essence, our Cherokee Nation government, especially our executive branch or legislative branch, makes decisions through law and policy. The decision on how our resources are to be used to carry out our plan is a budget, which the council and I approve each year. So the financial plan is a comprehensive budget. It authorizes employees of the Cherokee Nation to use those resources, and we try to design that budget according to all the steps prior to this to achieve that ultimate goal. The budget process for us starts in a cycle. If we start with the top left quadrant, our groups or divisions or departments or programs present proposals to be aligned with what we want to achieve, our long-term vision or strategy. So each year they're given a deadline saying if you want to do something or change something or innovate something to achieve this long-term goal, prepare your proposals. Those proposals go to a strategic budget committee. It reviews those to see if they're being aligned or promoting the overall strategy. There's lots of good ideas out there, but we can't fund every good idea. We don't have the resources, the time, and the energy. For example, 10 years ago, somebody approached me and they said, you've got a river, you've got a tugboat, which we did at the time. There's only one other inland tugboat school in the entire United States, and that's Paducah, Kentucky. You've got everything you need to set up your own tugboat pilot school. Well, it sounds like a good idea. For $150,000, we could have had one. But the question is, does that align with our long-term strategy? And I don't know how many Cherokees really want to be tugboat captains. So for $150,000, where could you put it better to achieve a long-term goal? I had to remind them that the last time Cherokees were on the Arkansas River, we did stand late and sent their paddle boat, and he's still sitting down there where he falls. So after the strategic budget committee reviews it, then it comes to me to review their recommendations. And that committee is made up of those group leaders who drive the long-term strategy, jobs, language, and community initiatives, plus somebody from accounting and somebody from the strategy group. So the SBC makes recommendations to me. I present the budget to you in September of each year. Then in October, when the budget's passed, we proceed to execute the overall strategy. So we're on a journey, and we start from point A, and ultimately point B is to build that nation. So let me ask you to ask questions.
You want to have any questions?
Yes.
Could you present the budget earlier than just one meeting before we need to approve it? So we have a little more time to look it over?
Well, actually, this last year was the anomaly because of the election, but basically we had a statutory deadline to present it to you. And then the time that you all spend on looking at it, it's really at your discretion. And when is it that we're required to have it to them?
I think it's the end of July.
So we get it to you by the end of July, so you've got...
So last year was just kind of unusual. We'll get it by August 1st.
I think we had it to you by August 1st.
Year before was when the inauguration.
Right, okay, year before, I'm sorry. Yours all run together.
Yeah.
But we'll get it by the end of July, so we can basically have August and September.
But we all understand how critical it is to have a budget on September 30th because the government shuts down. We have no authority to spend money. So besides the allocation of resources to the overall goal, it's our permission to spend money.
Let's count once.
Thank you. I'm curious, does this include, because you had presented, Mr. Enload presented on the education strategy, and we were supposed to be having all these meetings. I've asked for an update. I didn't know if this was part of this or included this work, but I haven't seen anything on the strategy for the education stuff and how this might relate to.
Well, basically, you saw this short clip that leadership drives the entire process. And we've invited the council to every meeting we've had. I'd be surprised if you didn't get notice of those meetings. We've had 2 large meetings, monthly meetings, then the subgroups are meeting regularly. Now, they haven't developed specific proposals yet, but I can have Todd to come up and tell you about that. But it really is important that if y'all can follow that education planning process, because that's a huge chunk of our work that we're going to be presenting to you. We'd love for y'all to be involved in. Excuse me.
Sorry, Jordan.
There was actually an opportunity at the leadership workshop that we had out at the place where we play to sign up if you wanted to be on one of the committees. I don't know how many council members I know went there. I don't know how many other council members went, but there was an opportunity then to sign up if you wanted to be part of the committees.
We can show you where we're at in the process, but then it's not too late to get involved in those committees because they've met 2 or 3 times. We're anticipating because of the breadth of the recommendations that it'll be a very good plan.
Questions? I have one kind of broad general question. In mapping this course down this road that you showed, what particular or what roadblocks do you foresee in accomplishing those 3 objectives of job, community, and what's that other?
Jobs, language, and
yeah, job, language, community. Are there any particular roadblocks that you see, for instance, like protecting our sovereignty? I see that as a constant daily challenge, it appears. Are there others that you anticipate could deter this path that, and I think it's very good, but what do we foresee that could lead us down a different direction?
Well, the actual formula for jobs, language, community came from Philip Martin in Philadelphia, Mississippi. He wasn't very articulate, but he was very wise. You may remember the episode, he had an auto manufacturing wire harness company, and they were going to take it out of Philadelphia. He had his marshals, so his police come in and said, no, you're not. Because they needed desperately those jobs on the reservation. Now they've taken them to Mexico because they've got enough jobs. But he said, that was his litany, jobs keeps people home in our communities, it allows us to keep our language and culture alive. And so it's a very well proven strategy. Now, any plan, we should anticipate problems. With any map, you're going to run into detours and potholes and problems. But the thing about having a plan, at least you're headed in the right direction and prepared to deal with those unforeseen issues. Part of planning is to foresee as many of those as you can. So as long as we stay headed the same direction, we'll get there a little bit sooner. One of the problems that I think is inherent is that how easily we get distracted from the plan. We head down I-40 and say, well, I'd sure like to pull off and get some ice cream at Henrietta, and you find yourself on a detour someplace where you really didn't intend to go. And with a large organization like this, that's very easy to do because there's lots of good projects out there. But the value of a strategy or a plan or a vision is staying focused. And I think that's the biggest challenge for our staff and me and for all of us.
Artie, did you have a question?
Yes, Chief. How do you feel our entities are following this plan? I know we hear from the entities on the report, job, language, and communities. Do you feel like that they're accomplishing those 3 paths? your satisfaction or to our satisfaction as Cherokee people?
Well, we always can improve. But what's fascinating, between 1968 until a few years ago, we didn't have a plan. You know, we just scrapped it as the best we could, and we made some progress. So the value is, if we had a cohesive long-term plan, could we achieve that quality of life faster? Our instrumentalities, we've asked them to create jobs. And we went and got some very good, talented people who knew how to make money. Translating, this is sort of a fascinating discussion because good businessmen see labor as an expense, but we see labor as an asset, and as actually a product. And so, using the same business discipline they've had to help them understand why creating a meaningful job is a product, we're in transition. But without those very good businessmen, we would not be where we're at in making progress.
And then just a follow-up question, your strategic business committee, how is it implemented by the board of directors on those entities? That they have the same working mechanism that you have here at the tribe? Like what you said a while ago, and I knew this from working here, that all of our grants, all of our money spent go to the strategic business committee. Do they have that same formula set up there?
You see, that's where we're in a change, we're in evolution basically, because 10 years ago we were just mom and pop organizations between CNE and CNI, and they're maturing, they're growing. That's why 2 or 3 years ago we created C&B as a shared services holding company. Now as we evolve, we begin to wonder, are there better ways to consolidate certain kind of services or functions but still create entrepreneurialism? We want C&I to be very aggressive. We want C&D to be aggressive in other areas. So it's an evolution process, and we're getting better at it.
And I understand that. I'm just wondering how much you're pushing those people to do the strategic planning that's not going to be here tonight.
Well, they're very sophisticated, extremely sophisticated.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Cobb?
Speaking of that, I've been fairly impressed when I was at the C&D board meetings. It seems like 2 or 3 times during those meetings, the phrase comes up, directive from administration, directive from, and so they're very aware of what the plan is there, and I've been real happy with that. I would like to maybe think about, stay focused, to introduce something into the vernacular that one of my concerns with government job reports is we've created this many jobs, and I always wonder what kind of jobs those are. I mean, is that, your basic, and I don't want to be condescending or demeaning, but the vernacular I'm looking for is I always think in the back of our minds we need to be thinking about creating generational careers, where I was extremely impressed, and I cannot remember her name, and I know you remember, Madam Speaker, that works what is now CNI, and we recognized her at the council meeting. You could tell that not only she, but her family had a vested interest in not only CNI, but Stillwell. I mean, they had a vested interest in what was going on there. She was extremely proud of what she had done.
Lizzie Duval.
Yes. That's the kind of things that, not just, and I'm not insinuating that we're doing otherwise, but I always want to keep one eye on the fact that, creating careers where those individuals' children are like, I might follow in my parents' footsteps, and I always want to keep one eye on that. I think we're going to do a good job of that, but I always want to keep that in the back of our minds.
So that's a very good point, because there's 2 ways to look at that. Because her job when it started out was just a line worker, and you might say, well, that's a menial job that means very little, but for her and for her family and for that community, it's huge. And now we have, our minimum wage is up, which is above industry, above federal requirements. All those jobs have health insurance and retirement. The service industry is extremely rare. But the thing about our education leadership plan is the other part of that is that, and perhaps I need to come back and pitch that to you again. But the idea is, if we we talk about competitive intelligence, and that's what can we do as good or better than anybody else that we enjoy doing. And a good example is if we had a group of Cherokees that just love making knives, well, then they want to make knives for generations. So perhaps what should drive our business strategy is we ought to go out and buy the best knife marketing company in the world, so we folks could make knives and we can make a living at it. And so that's competitive intelligence. What we've found so far is that Cherokees have this very protective, nurturing attitude, so they do very well in the gaming industry. They do very well in the medical industry, as nurses and doctors. They're more creative, so in the arts and crafts industry for cultural tourism, that's a cluster that we should advance. So once you have the competitive intelligence, maybe that's how we should design our industries. And then if we understand what industries we want to build in the future, we work back, we align our education systems to accomplish those skills. And so that's what the entire education plan's about. And starting with the design of the economy, figuring out what those clusters are, and aligning our education systems and leadership systems.
Baker?
And Chief, on every one of these highways or pathways or whatever, there are potholes.
Yes.
And one specific is, I guess, we just sent out a memo to the homeless shelters that we are suspended our emergency housing. In other words, even though we tell them that if you move into a shelter, we can, help them with emergency housing or help them, get back on their feet and all. The shelters have been sent out this memo that says that doesn't say we're out of money. It just says that it's been suspended. Your strategic budget committee, have they addressed this, or are they going to address it?
We're bringing a budget reallocation to deal with that.
Okay.
So it'll be temporary.
Okay, but pretty quick.
Yes.
And so that we can unsuspend that deal. The other thing I saw up on the screen that we're a tribe of laws and policies and all sorts of that. As you well recall, I guess it's been almost 3 years ago now, the council passed the balance of the bonus to the employees of $340 apiece. You vetoed it, line item vetoed it, and the Supreme Court has now come back and said that you can't do that. It was budgeted, it was to be given to them, and you and I visited last month, or maybe 2 months ago, when the ruling came out, and pretty much you said that your staff and you had mused over it, that what does that mean? Well, I think it means that we owe them $340 apiece, and that the contingency budget reserve might be a good place to find it. And it was illegally.
No, stop right there. We're not going to do that.
Well, he said
it was not
no,
illegal.
This isn't. I'm not saying that you're a criminal. That's not what I'm
Well,
saying.
then don't use those words then.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled that it shouldn't have been done that way.
They ruled that I had no authority under that section of the Constitution to have a line item veto.
That's right. And the only thing you line item was the balance of the raise to the employees, or not the raise, the bonus, of which needed to be $500 each, so that you could take your indirect cost and your sick leave and all that stuff that you didn't give them.
You want to gross up the bonus.
Of course, you
pay
grossed
for
it
the
down.
people's
Yeah.
withholdings. I understand the issue. So what's the question?
Are we going to make good on what we passed, the law that we passed, to give the employees the balance of what we passed a law to give them?
The law was a budget.
The
The budget expires each year. It's not a 3-year budget, it's not a 5-year budget, it's a budget.
That's why we have contingency reserves.
The contingency reserve is where you reallocate funds, and with a budget line, it is a reserve. And that budget It provided for that gross up. I vetoed it. The budget year expired, there's no authority to spend it. And if you're a lawyer, or if you, or whoever brought the lawsuit, had asked the judge to impound that in some way, then it would have been available for expenditure. It was not.
But if
That
we're,
authority was expended. And so you now have, 3 years later, the political question: do we want to give those folks a bonus, a gross-up bonus from 3 years ago?
I
Now,
think
the
they
council
deserve
wants
the
to entertain that,
balance
it's
of
fine,
what they
but my
were given.
position is no.
And that was your position before, and that's why you knew that you didn't have a line item veto, and you line item vetoed it. Because it didn't go your way.
But I took my position because there's no prohibition in the Constitution that said I couldn't line item veto it. And I think it was a wise decision. It was on the eve of an election. I firmly believe it was politically motivated. It wasn't good for the tribe. It wasn't good for a budget. It didn't promote responsibility. So I disagree with you 100%.
And I disagree totally. I mean, gasoline prices were up at $4 a gallon, and the portion that they got, I think, did a great deal of good. And then political gain for play to not give them their 1,000 and to gross it down to $666. But I believe this tribe owes those employees.
So does this discussion have something with the overall strategy map?
I was just going from the strategy map where you said that we were a nation of laws and policies.
That's right.
And if we make the laws and we pass the policies, then what's good for the goose ought to be good for the gander.
And that's why we have a court to reconcile differences. And I think we've had differences in the past, and there may be the opportunity to have differences in the future. In that case, it's still open. You know, the court did not say you are required to pay that. The only ruling of the court was there was no authority under that section of the Constitution to effect a line item veto.
And that's why you thought it was funny.
No, sir, I never thought it was
Well,
funny.
you
I
told
thought
me
it was very
that you were
serious.
musing about it.
Musing is as to a deliberative process, how to consider it. Musing, M-U-S-E.
Okay.
Mr. Thornton?
I'd like to kind of get back to this jobs, language, and community.
Me too.
To me, in all three of those categories, education and experience would be the background bring forward on those. And I like this education summit you got going. I think it's going to bring our schools, maybe our schools up to date if we can do that, and present additional counseling. I'm crazy about this counseling business for our children, because our children, to me, don't know where to go, and they don't have the proper guidance. Sometimes it isn't, the parents at home that really give that proper guidance, and sometimes it's somewhere else. But I don't think they're getting it in our public schools, and that's just the way I feel about it. I think it's been going on for years. And that's one reason that I think we have the dropouts, because these kids are set, they don't have goals set in their life, and they're not planning for a better future and for the generations to come. But anyway, with all that said, like was told to us here, with no vision, your people perish. And I'm crazy about this education experience, because I think we have people out there that have the experience and the education that would volunteer their time to go in these public schools and help. But I don't know what you got going in education, but that's primarily my thoughts, and I thank you.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Augusta Smith at Sequoia is the best example. She was able to work with those kids. Just this year, $3 million of scholarships, 28 gate scholars. And so that's some of the recommendations we're anticipating coming out of this education leadership plan. The point is that education, social services, housing, health, they're not the end. They're a means to help people to help themselves. And the ultimate goal is that they have achieved.
I believe in our public schools is where we need to branch. You know, and I think it would help all of those categories that you just mentioned. I think it would bring it forward, and that's just my thought. I think we're wasting money on going somewhere else like tugboat business, and there's thousands of businesses out there we can get into. It's not going to help us if we don't have the people in the proper education. Thank you.
I wanted to expand on something from Councilor Thornton. He used the word volunteers, and this may have already been addressed, but it came up about a month ago. I do believe there are some instances, especially in language, where we have some people that could really volunteer to help in some situations, but they have issues getting certified, they have to go to a certification process, and it's just not something, a lot of these people are older, and I'm not sure it's something that they're going to really put the effort for to go get certified, and then they can already speak the language. And I understand that at a certain level there has to be some ability to teach the language, but I do think, and it may have already been addressed, but I do think on some levels there are some volunteers that we could really utilize their expertise in a entry level. Anyway, that came up last month, and I'm glad you brought that up, volunteers. So.
Gentleman from Mays County, Crystal.
Yes, Chief, went over the strategic plan. I'm just curious, how often has the plan been reviewed to date, and how often would it be reviewed in the future? Is it an annual review, or is it biannual, or what's the...
Well, the high-level stuff, the vision, jobs, language, community stays the same, but the strategy maps and the balance scorecard, that's an annual review, and we do that as part of the budget cycle. We have to evaluate if what we're doing is effective, and if not, we need to relook at it, reallocate our resources someplace else.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief Smith, for taking time to come over and present that. Todd, did you have anything further to add? You always have something to say.
Well, I'm pleased that you guys heard out the chief, and we engaged the businesses to deal with exactly some of the issues that you guys brought up about, how engaged, how connected our businesses and our entities. And we wanted to make sure everybody understands the vision of the plan. And that's what the whole intent was today, is say, a lot of times maybe we don't present that very well, but we wanted to introduce that to you today so that you understand that we do have a big master plan. And so when we do come in with budgets and request spending authority, it's interconnected into larger plans of jobs, language, and community, and how they help us to build a happy and healthy nation. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone in the audience? Melanie, you don't have anything to say? Oh. Okay, moving on to, are there any announcements? Wow, this is an easy group. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion, John.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. We are adjourned. Yes.